Direct from Fort Meade, Maryland, this is Dinfos Live.
Hello and welcome to another excellent episode of Dinfos Live. I'm Major David J. Murphy, a Dinfos instructor and your host for today's program. On episode 1 of our show, we talked all about social media and its importance in the information environment. Well, today we're happy to welcome back the guest of that episode to give us an update on the latest trends in social media for 2023. Please welcome back to the program the Dinfos Social Media Training Office Manager, Mr. Kwande Hall. Welcome back, Kwande.
Hey, what's up, brother?
Please have a seat.
Yep, you got it.
Now, if any of you out there watching would like to ask a question of Mr. Hall, don't hesitate to leave your questions down in the comments below, and we might just read them on the air. All right, Kwande, please give us a little bit of a detail about yourself, your life, and your history with public affairs and social media.
Okay, wow. So, Kwande Hall, Dinfos Social Media Program Manager for training and development. I'm basically tasked with training and curriculum development for the schoolhouse. Been there for 5 years now. Prior to that, I spent 14 years in the Marine Corps, half of that time as a public affairs, in the public affairs world. Was fortunate or unfortunate enough to start out the Marine Corps social media back in 2010. So I've been basically entrenched in this social media realm for probably the last 13 years now. So.
Wow,
Yeah.
Outstanding. That definitely shows that you're a subject matter expert on the topic, and we're really lucky to have you here. So let's not beat around the bush and get people what they want to know about, why they tuned into the program, which is, what are some of the top social media trends for 2023?
Oh, wow. So trends. I guess short form video would probably be the biggest.
Yeah.
Everybody's jumping on that. All the platforms are kind of geared towards that whole short form video format. But that's not to say that, these other forms of content aren't just going away, right?
Right.
Long form still has a place. YouTube, your Vimeos, things like that.
Sure.
But the platforms are designed and set up for more of this short form video content format. Because that's what people want. The people are always going to be the driving force behind social media and those trends.
Yeah.
They are always going to be the people who determine what is success and failure, what our content should look like. So we've got to really tune into our audiences, and understand what it is that they want to hear from us, or how they want to consume information from us. But the platforms, they're constantly changing, I know there's a huge focus on groups in the Facebook world, because they want to design it for more niche, you want more niche communities to kind of come together.
Right.
They made it so that you can take a personal profile and make it like a professional business profile, so that you have a little bit further reach. Your LinkedIn is kind of changing and evolving. You're able to do slide decks and short form video there and things like that as well. So, they're constantly updating. I think you just got to do your research and understand, these things are going to continually change, and try to stay as up to date as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree with you more. Short form vertical video, I can't approach a platform without seeing some sort of way they've incorporated that into their systems. But is there still a place for photo, graphics, text-based content on those platforms?
Oh, absolutely. I think, short form is just a portion of your overall strategy. You should definitely not abandon, your photos and your graphic design. Your graphics and doing surveys and things like that. People are still kind of pulled in by those things. You can probably see it on your own Facebook feeds. You'll see just friends using, just a simple background with words or text on it, Those are still just as impactful as a photo, which is, photo's worth 1,000 words, right? Photo imagery, captive imagery is always going to be a driving force. Video is just one of those things that makes it a little bit easier to consume information, And we are in a society where people are constantly scrolling, so you've got to be able to capture that attention. And really short form video, you can say a lot in that little bit of time, and a lot of times it kind of draws people in. But don't abandon all those other tools as well,
Absolutely. Obviously a lot of units and websites and different pages have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Those are probably the most common, right? But should units be looking at smaller or newer platforms to potentially branch out into, or should they stick to what's tried and true?
Well, it's the DoD 5400 TAC 17 kind of dictates and determines what platforms we can use and who authorizes approval of newer platforms, you know. So you should be going through DISA and should be going through, you know, if you're looking at other platforms. So that, which is why we always stick with the, you know, your main 5, your Facebook, your Instagram, YouTube. But as part of social media, I mean, I think it's important to be able to understand that all those other platforms are out there. There's over 100, literally over 100 social media platforms when you really think about social and two-way communication.
Sure.
You know, so you got to be able to kind of tune into all of them. If you're not paying attention to Reddit, or if you're not paying attention to Quora, or paying attention to, you know, WhatsApp and those capabilities that are there and things like that, you know, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice in this space. You know, as a communicator, you've got to understand it's environmental scanning, right? I've got to understand all of these platforms. I got to understand the conversations that's happening in all of these places. I know, you know, we shy away from, you know, the platform that shall not be named, right?
Yeah, of course.
But there's a lot of us on those platforms.
Sure.
And so as a communicator, as a PA chief or social media chief, it's important that I tune in to at least listen to the conversations that are being had there, you know, to listen and understand what people are saying, what people are looking for in those spaces, and then how can I incorporate that into my social strategy? Is it something that I need to incorporate into my social strategy, you know?
Right.
It's a part of the entire world, the digital world that exists, you know, it's composed of all of that. And so I've got to pay attention to it, at least pay attention to it. That doesn't necessarily mean that I need a command presence there.
Right.
But I do need to use those social monitoring, social listening, you know, on those platforms to understand the environment.
Absolutely. I remember back probably about a decade ago or so, a previous Chief Master of the Air Force actually did an AMA on Reddit, which was huge at the time.
Right.
Right? To kind of take that forward-leaning step towards engaging on a platform that we didn't normally traditionally engage on, I think was a great way to really get social listening and hear from the actual audience and stakeholders we're trying to engage with.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned short form vertical video as a very popular platform and a very popular way to communicate. Is there any particular tips or tricks or recommendations you would give on how best to create short form vertical video content with regard to what we're actually portraying on it, or the length of time that we're making those videos?
You know, I think as a general rule of thumb, you know, people say like 10 to 20 seconds, right, is your sweet spot. But I think, you know, you got to think about how often you consume video and how, you know, there are platforms, people spend hours on YouTube. They spend hours, like, think about how long have you actually streamed a television show, right? You know, I know we have, they say that our attention span is short, but I really think it's attention span to get you, to grab your attention.
Sure.
But there are ways to get people to watch longer form video, you know?
Absolutely.
If I sat here and said, hey, you know what, at the end of this episode, I'm gonna give you the top 2 things you need to do social media correctly.
Right.
Right? You know, would you stick around for the entire episode if it was 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, right? Would you fast forward through it? I think you got to look at your analytics and see, you know, are people using, you know, is this something that I've used that's going to make people watch longer or stay around longer, you know? So, yeah, you know, the crazy thing about social is there's no one size fits all. I can't just sit here and go, hey, guys, if you go out and make 10-second videos right now and post them on all your social channels, you're going to be successful. Like, that's not how it works. If it did, I mean, obviously I probably wouldn't be sitting here. But you know, you've got to figure out what it is that your audience wants from you. Right. You know, how they want to connect with you. Is it in short form? Sure. You know, maybe. Is it in a longer form? Is it using photos? Is it using graphics? Is it using all the things that you have available to you? I think you've got to kind of weave in and out and figure out, you know, A/B testing is great. You know,
sure.
Do a 10-second video, do a 30-second video. Which one is more successful? You know, why is it more successful? Is it the time, or is it the content or the concept that's within the video itself that's keeping people around longer, you know?
Right.
I've seen some very successful 2-minute videos in the military, you know, and I've seen some not so successful 15, 20-second videos in the military, you know?
Right.
So I think you gotta kind of tap into what your audience wants from you, and really tap into how you're creating that content and delivering that content on these platforms.
Absolutely. Have you seen any examples, either inside or outside the DoD, that might be something we can learn from as sort of best case scenarios or best use case scenarios?
Oh, wow. You know what? Oh, wow. Natural Park Service is really good on Twitter. And I think it's not only their content, which is engaging, but they actually engage. I think engagement goes a long way on social media.
Sure.
I think the people that do social the best, the Coast Guard does really good on Instagram, right? I think it's not only their content, but it's their engagement strategy that follows along with it. You know, they're not afraid of the comment section. They're not afraid to further push their messaging by engaging with their audience. And because they're doing that, the algorithms naturally push their message even further than, you know, probably they intend in the first place.
Right.
I think a lot of times we forget about the engagement factor when it comes to social. We want to use social as like this push medium.
Sure.
And it's not that. Like, it's always been designed for two-way communication.
Right.
You know, it's not television, it's not a billboard, you know, it's not something we just push and forget. We've got to pay attention to the conversations that we're starting and we're beginning.
Yep.
And I think the people that pay attention to that and find ways, creative ways to engage their audience and bring their personality out in their comments and you know, to drive home those command messages and all those things that we teach on the back end, I think those are the ones that are the most successful, depending on what you determine success is, right? You might go to one of these two platforms and be like, you know what, this is boring to me. But it's working for them. It's working for that organization, and it's working for the audience that's following them. Because they continue to tune in, they continue to pay attention, they continue to get, you know, the reach that they're trying to get, you know. So I think, you know, those are just two. But, you know, I think the people that do it best and successfully are the ones that have a full-on social strategy, and you can see it in their engagement, you can see it in their posts, you can see it in their content delivery, you know, and those are the ones that do it well, I think.
Yeah, on the opposite end of that, on the other side of the spectrum, are there any cautionary tales that we should learn from so that we don't potentially make pitfalls or mistakes when we go out there on social media?
Yeah, I think in that same regard, in the content and the engagement, I think trying to distance yourself, bringing your personal feelings into it, a lot of times are the things that get us in trouble, well, at least that I've seen. So what happens is you are representing this organization, you know, if you're in uniform, if you're a leader, or if you're, you know, and it's when we start to engage those trolls or those bots or those people that are kind of poking the bear anyway, and we bring our personal opinions into it by leaning on the ethical values and nature of the organization, that we find ourselves in trouble. And those are the ones that usually make the headlines, right? Those are the ones that, oh, you know, how dare that, you know, we did this. Because it's never this person did it, it's this general or this command or this unit did this, right? And it's usually because, again, it's not having a full-on engagement strategy and understanding of what it is that we want to say, and kind of doing so on the fly, doing live, right? Hey, we're live, you know, I'm just going to say whatever.
That's right.
You got to be cautious of those types of things, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The times I've seen pitfalls occur with, you know, not units, but actually more in the corporate side on the private sector, is when a company will want to message or communicate to an audience and they're just somewhat tone deaf to how that audience is going to respond to it, right? They know what they want to say internally, but then they say it and they haven't taken into account exactly how the audience is going to interpret that information. They haven't done their due diligence or their research and their social listening, and what happens is this just becomes a tone-deaf message, and then they have to come out and apologize for it and stuff like that. So do your research, understand your audience, understand your stakeholders and how they want to receive information, then communicate to them on their level.
Yeah, absolutely.
We actually have a question from social media.
Okay.
Carly Logue asks, Instagram users often discuss whether a post is grid-worthy or not, meaning whether it's suitable for their main profile or better suited for their stories. What's your take on this?
Yeah, you know, Instagram is like 3 social platforms in one. It really is, because you've got your main wall, right? And then you've got your stories, and then you've got your, you know, it's like, so you've got to determine, and it's weird because Instagram kind of tries to help you determine, hey, should this be a story? Should this be a highlight? You know what I'm saying? I think at the end of the day, it depends on your audience and how they want to consume that information. You know, is it best as a wall feed? You know, is it best that we just make this simple post and keep it there? You know, is this a longer form piece of content that would do better as a story that we want to kind of just fade away in time? You know, I think it's the importance of the message. And I think you should create that content strategy for it, right? And so, all right, we're going to do this as a post, but we're going to try this as a story. And then do your, look at your analytics, see what the audience, how the audience responds. Did they respond to this piece of content here? Was it better received here than it was here? You kind of got to do that thing. A lot of things about social is kind of trial and error, right? There's no one size fits all. There's no, hey, go out, make sure you're doing this as your IG story, every single time. You can't really do that. You've got to do your due diligence and do your due research to understand your audience and how they're consuming your information, and then figure out what's the best place for that piece of content. And I know that's probably, she's probably like, yeah, you ain't answering my question, but it's really, that's what it is. It's the whole thing about social media is this constant learning environment, this constant opportunity to learn more and more and more about your organization, and learn more and more about your audience and how they want to receive information from you. And so it's a constant, you're in this constant process of writing down, discovery, and writing down content, and writing down, all right, what was the pros and cons of doing it this way, right? And then saying, all right, well, you know what? We had better success doing it as this type of post vice this vice, or on this platform versus this platform. We've been using Instagram, but man, we've got a really strong following on Twitter. Like I've got to really tone into what it is that I want to do and try to determine what my success factors for that is going to be, and then decide, am I meeting these goals that I'm trying to set for myself?
Right. I will say the only thing I know with regard to Instagram is that you can put a gallery in one post, right? So with anything like that, whether it be Facebook where you have a series of images, you want to make sure that first image is powerful, impactful, and draws the attention of the viewer, because you want them to look at all the images in the gallery. So make sure that first image is very strong. Right,
but the trick with that is, again, it goes back to your algorithms, right? Same thing with LinkedIn. You can do these slides, right? Sometimes when you go to, the beauty of doing like, hey, I want to put like 5 images in a post, okay, is the algorithm will show that post different. Right?
Oh, okay.
And so it might recycle that post back into the feed because, hey, you saw this picture from this one, but here's the third photo. Did you see that one, right? And so, and that's determined on all kinds of factors, how long did people actually stay on that particular photo when they were swiping through. It's really, algorithms, that's a whole nother discussion altogether. But yeah, you've got to consider those things.
Absolutely. Social media managers, that's a full-time job, many units, obviously, and it's tough to do and do well. With all of the demands placed on someone to try to obviously manage a unit social media page and leverage all of the different metrics that can be leveraged, are there any tools you would recommend for those folks who are just trying to do the best they can?
Yeah, there's a lot of, free platforms out there. There's a lot of not free platforms out there. You got your the HubSpot, your Hootsuite, other platforms like that. There's a lot of organic platforms within the platforms themselves that'll help you kind of manage posting and scheduling and things of that nature. I think you have to look at your organization and see, there's a lot of military units that contract out that information or contract out to certain platforms to get usage and things like that. I think you have to see what's available to you.
Right.
And really, I think at the end of the day, it's important to understand what those platforms are actually doing for you, right? Okay. Is it a scheduling software that you're actually looking for? And if that's the case, is this something that I can do organically, or is this something that, if I buy this big platform, is it helping me, schedule across platforms a little easier, things of that nature? I think you have to understand what that tool is doing and not be so dependent on that tool, but then utilize or understand, is there a tool out there that will better help me to manage the things that I'm trying to manage? And like I said, there's a lot of free ones out there. There's a few non-free ones out there. It's really, I think, at the discretion of the organization or the unit.
Absolutely. And if there are tools out there that aren't currently funded by the unit, then look into those opportunities to see how you can get the funding to potentially buy those services. I know some of the services themselves at the service level do offer services and do offer subscriptions to programs that all units can take advantage of. So see what exists out there for you, your unit, and potentially talk to your higher headquarters. There might be options out there that you aren't even thinking about.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about social media and what it looks like in 2024 and beyond, right? Can you put on your thinking cap and your prediction crystal ball and look into it and tell me what can we expect in 2024 and beyond?
You know, I wish I had that crystal ball. You know, I probably wouldn't be sitting in the studio. Um, you know, the reality is, you know, it's a digital age, and, you know, there's a lot of things that are coming. I think the audience will always dictate, again, what is going to be success and failure. But there are things, I mean, your VR is out there, your AI is out there. These are live, actual things that are happening right now. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, I think, hesitance to use these things, you know, rightfully so. And we do not make policy here at Dinfos, so I don't want to get into a policy discussion by any means. I mean, you got to look at what policies and doctrine are out there for your organization. Absolutely. And make sure you're following those things and be cautious about these things. But, you know, like I said, the reality is that your Google and you know, Bing are using AI incorporated into these tools now. Sure. You know, and it's a part of life. It's you know, they had a discussion just yesterday with the government about AI. So there's a lot of concern there. But I also look at these tools kind of like how I look at Photoshop. You know, when Photoshop came around for photographers, it was like, oh my God, photography is going to go away. And that's not what it did. What it did is it helped photographers enhance the beauty of their images. And I think you have to look at AI in the same manner. You know, it's one of those things that can enhance the things that we do as public affairs and social media strategists. Right. So it can give me more tools to think about how to create content, or what you know, a better way to deliver this piece of content or that type of content. You know, but I think you have to be conscientious of again, what you're putting into these things. Sure. So what you put in, you get out. Yeah. And like I said, I'm sure there are discussions out there right now that is happening, but, you know, the reality is you're talking 2024, 2025, you know, the next 3-4 years, you know, these things are going to be incorporated into these social media platforms, and you know, algorithmically speaking and thinking about what's driving content, you know, it's going to be a big part of it. And so we've got to, I think we need to take the time to at least research it and understand that these things exist. And then kind of go forward with optimism with it, I think. You know,
I think it's interesting, yeah. Something with AI that I think is interesting is that it's being so quickly absorbed into all these different programs and browsers and Photoshop and everything like that, that it's almost going to be harder to avoid than it is to actually seek out and use, because it's going to be there, whether you want it or not.
I mean, it's been here, you know, actively going for the last 6, 7, 8 months, you know, like actively, like boom, boom, it's here now. You know, so it's how does that change my strategy? How does that change the way that I use social? How does that improve or you know, not improve my use of social media and the platforms that I'm using and understanding? You know, I think there's definitely going to play a part in how we communicate in the future and how we continue to communicate using social media and all the other channels that we choose to use.
You know, one technology that's existed for a long time and has come into recent prominence just because other major companies are stepping into the sector is AR and VR. Do you see a place for units to perhaps engage on those platforms in a social media context?
I mean, yeah, sure. You know, can I see a world where people go into like a virtual recruiting office, you know, and sit down and have discussions with? Yeah, absolutely. I think so. But, you know, you don't want to jump ahead too fast. I think at the end of the day, whatever we choose to do, whatever we choose, however we choose to communicate, however we choose to engage with people, we've got to make sure that it aligns with our unit, our organization's message. Sure. It aligns with our values, and it's what we intend to get done. You know, you got to kind of build it into social strategy is communication strategy. Right? It's all built in together. So, you know, when I'm looking at all these tools that are available to me, social media, my website, my email channels, my end-to-end, you know, messaging apps and things like that, you know, how do I incorporate all of those things into an overall communication strategy? How do I effectively utilize all these things to communicate my message and get my intent out there, right? You build it all in together, and then you kind of evaluate, all right, is it the time for me to explore VR? Is it a time for me to explore, you know, this platform? Is it a time, you know, should I be on Reddit? Should I be, you know, paying attention to Cure? Or should I be, you know, looking at TikTok or the new, you know, what is it called, Blue Sky that's being in development? You know, like, and everybody's like, oh God, what's Blue Sky? So don't worry, it's not a big thing yet, but it's coming. You know, how do I incorporate all of those things into my communication strategy? Is it a thing that, I need to look at doing and incorporating into the things that I'm trying to communicate?
Yeah, no, at the end of the day, it makes sense. If it makes sense to use it, right? If that's who your audience is, if that's who your stakeholders are, then maybe it makes sense to have a place on that, engage on that platform.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's a million different things you can do on social media. You have to do what makes sense with regard to how you're going to be able to best engage with that key public and that stakeholder.
Exactly.
In general, though, in talking about engagement, has it gotten easier or harder in 2023?
I don't know if it's gotten easier or harder. I mean, I think the realization that we have to engage has become more prevalent.
Okay.
I get the amount of emails I get that's like questions like, how do I delete people? Or how do I, ban this? So, I think it's all a part of that entire engagement strategy and being involved in the conversation that we're starting.
Sure.
A lot of times with social, we forget that this is about two-way communication, right? Which means if I agree to be on social media and I put something on social media, there's a high chance that somebody's going to respond, right? And then what do I do as a result of that? We've in the beginning, we didn't consider that. It was like, hey, let's get this message out. And then people would respond, and it's like, wait, they're not responding how I want them to respond. So what do I do? We didn't think through what's the next step, right? And so I think that's becoming more and more of a realization, as information is getting mixed up in this digital space, and people take our intent or intended message and interpret it in ways that they want. We're finding that, oh man, sometimes we have to clarify, or sometimes we've got to kind of guide the conversation, or sometimes we've got to manage that people aren't bullying and attacking, the people that are just here to consume information, right? And so we start to realize that, man, we need a full-on content strategy. We need a full-on engagement strategy. We need a full-on, social media is not just worried about Facebook, it's so much broader than that. I got an email just today. It was like, hey, give me the social media, what's the basics of social media? What social media 101. I'm like, all right, so what is that, right? What is social media 101? Because for me, it's all right, what policies or procedures exist out there? What platforms are we looking at? How do those platforms work? The algorithms behind those platforms and how it's pushing out my information. What analytics are we going to look at? How do I know if I'm being successful or failing at this thing? What type of content am I putting out there? What is my engagement strategy? What is the impact of the information that's going out there? How do I manage all the information? There is no 101. Like, what is basic social media use? What is basic communication skills in a digital environment? It's so broad. It's so broad. And so it's having to consume or pull in all of that. And I think that's the thing that's made engagement harder, is understanding that, man, it's not just me making a post and then having a response. It's all of these things together.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to look at in terms of statistics and back-end details that you have to consider with regard to how people are engaging with the content.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, we have another question from social media. Rachel R. asks, with Instagram's shift towards a video-centric platform, is it a waste of time or energy to keep using it as a photo platform?
Well, it's a good question.
Interesting.
But yeah, it is. But I think at the end of the day, Instagram has always been photo-centric, right? I mean, even when they started making the change to video, you had a lot of influencers and a lot of people that were just like, wait a minute, like, where's my stills? I think it's about quality and not quantity. I think a powerful image still speaks volumes on a platform like that. And I think, again, it goes back to the user. Like, I think about my use of Instagram. The videos are nice, yeah, but most of the time I just scroll through them. The thing that stops me is a strong image, right? Like, that's the thing that stops me on Instagram, because that's what I'm there for. And I think your audience, all in all, I mean, when you look at statistically, photos is still like a high percentage of the content that goes on Instagram is still photo.
Right.
And so, I am not to say I am not the end all be all. I think you have to listen to your audience, and they will determine what direction that goes into. A lot of things, there's a platform that shall not be named that has started to make everyone else, change the way that they're delivering content because of this other platform. They're trying to keep up in a sense. But, I think photo still has a place, and I think that'll always be the case. Pinterest is still, strong, right? Flickr is still a thing out there. It's probably not used as much as it used to be, but
it still exists.
Like, it still exists, right? So I think there's a place for it, and I think as long as your content you're delivering quality content there, I think both can coexist.
Well, I think it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, right? Just because short form vertical video is the hotness right now doesn't mean you can ignore text or graphics or photos, right? So I would say to continue to leverage the platform for what it's best at, which is photos. Instagram, I think, it started out as a photo first platform and it's adopted video, but still photos is where it shines. So I wouldn't ignore photos as a content type because it depends on how your audience reacts to and responds to what you put out there. And there are people who really like great photos and respond to it really well and love to comment on them. And there's people who like video. So I wouldn't ignore photos at all.
I think having that dynamic content strategy is helpful anyway, So mix up photo and video and text. Well, I wouldn't necessarily use text on Instagram, but mix up those two things, right? And find what works for you. Find if there's a sweet spot in there that, oh, you know what, I'm having just as much success on my photo as I am on these short video formats. Right?
Well, I will say it's interesting. Sometimes you see people post images on Instagram that are text. Right, like take screenshots of text, and those become very popular sometimes. So it's interesting to see what works on any individual platform.
The thing about Instagram, I mean, especially like in your stories, it gives your audience another opportunity to engage with you because you can put polls on there, you can put things in there so they can go in and actually engage with that piece of content. So that's why people, again, you want to find that mix. You want to find. See if there's a sweet spot in there for you to utilize all of those things.
Absolutely. A lot of times, units will say, like, let's just do social media, and that'll be our strategy in which we're going to communicate. But, is there still a place for the more traditional methods of communication, the in-person, the television, the other things like that? Or should social media be seen as the panacea to solve all of our problems?
I would never put all my eggs in one basket. Social media is a way to communicate. It's not the only way to communicate, right? You still got email. You still got your website. You still have, posters on the wall, and you still got commercials running on television. You got to think about social media as a part of a communication strategy, right? And I've got all of these tools available to me to communicate my message, right? And I can utilize social media to be very specific about who I want to reach and communicate to in a certain way. And then I can still use my website to communicate things, and I can still use email blasts, and I can still use in-person events and things like that to communicate my overall message and overall intent. So I think strategically, you've got to be able to utilize all these things. You don't want to just lean on one thing. What happens if you put everything on Facebook and Facebook gets bought out tomorrow, shut down by the government or something, something like that? What do you do then, right? Like, oh my goodness, what do you do now, right? I think you have to strategically think about all these things and then learn to tell your story across all these channels that are available to you.
Absolutely. What about influencers? Can they be leveraged or utilized in such a way in 2023 that is different than the past, or today more than ever?
Yeah. Influencers are interesting, especially in the military and DoD. I think first we have to understand what an influencer is, right? Us as organizations are influencers. People look for, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, what have you, for certain pieces of information, and we have a circle of influence around certain topics, right? And then, you got to look at your leaders. There are leaders in your organization that are influencers. There are people within your organization that are influencers. So there are opportunities there to kind of, utilize these voices that exist. But there's a danger there as well, right? So, you don't want to connect your wagon to this horse, and then they're leading you down the wrong path, right? I've seen it used great. There was a Marine Corps martial arts program out in California. They had a famous YouTube MMA fighter, come out and wrestle like 30 Marines, right? And so you get this guy, he's making these Marines just tap out in this McMap program. But then they had a discussion about McMap and how, and so you've got this guy who has all this influence, and he's telling the story about the Marine Corps, and it made sense. It ties together, right? As long as I think it aligns with your overall command mission and what it is that you're trying to do, I think you have those opportunities. But at the same time, I shouldn't be out here looking for Beyonce to I don't know, say something about Dinfos Live one day, right? It's like, oh wow,
I can only hope.
Yeah, right. It's like how realistic is it for me to actually work with these people or incorporate an influencer into my communication strategy? There are opportunities, and I think we have to look at it. There was a Army Master Sergeant I met probably last year, and she had a whole influencer program. She identified soldiers and troops within the organization that had a ring of influence. And so she would, she vetted them all out, made sure that they were on the up and up, and was very clear about, hey, I want to utilize you as an influencer, but these are the rules of engagement. This is, how we're going to carry forward. And this is how you can maintain, your position in this, in this realm or in this capacity. Right. And if you violate, boom, 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 then we're going to stop using them. But then she would use these people, and they would come to like big events, and then she would use them to kind of amplify the messages that she was trying to get out.
Right.
Great opportunity, right? Great idea. But we also have to be very cautious, as the DoD PA 5400 is very clear about personal and professional use of social, and trying to divide those two things. So we've got to be conscious of that, and conscious of what the policy says, and conscious of how it determines how we can utilize an influencer, or how we can become influencers ourselves,
Right, no, absolutely. I think that's very important that we prescribe to policy and doctrine anytime we're doing anything on social media, or anytime we're doing something we're engaging with the public, for sure. Mm-hmm. One of the examples that I remember back from my own career is when I was at Keesler Air Force Base. We had an air show. We actually invited a YouTuber to engage with the Thunderbirds as part of the program to promote the Thunderbirds, to promote the Air Force, and it resulted in a really interesting engagement that ultimately led to a video that was seen by millions of people on his channel. But it helped, again, promote the Air Force, promote the Thunderbirds, and get that message out there.
Yeah.
What about social listening? Has that changed at all in 2023, or is that pretty much the same?
I think it's just as important. I don't know if it's changed. We've got to, as a communicator, be able to understand the entirety of the environment, the digital environment as a whole. And so there are conversations that are being held on lesser known sites or smaller sites, your Reddits, your Quoras, platforms like that. Then I've got to pay attention to it so that I know how to effectively reach and communicate to the audience that I'm trying to reach and communicate to. You've got to build it into the overall strategy. It's important. It plays an important role. If you're not paying attention to what conversations are being had, social media, every unit that I've ever been with has had some type of command climate survey, right? And social media is the ultimate command climate survey. If there's something wrong with your organization, people are talking about it, right? The people within the organization are talking about it. People that are associated with the organization are talking about it. And if you're just turning a blind eye, or you're not listening to those things, then how can you effectively communicate what it is that you're trying to communicate? How can you effectively reach the people that you're trying to reach if you don't even know what it is, what their concerns are, or what their wants are, what their desires are? I've got to be in tune with my audience, and I've got to be in tune with what they want and how they want to hear information or consume information from me.
Yeah, I'd say if anything, there's just more to listen to,
Absolutely.
Right? That's the biggest thing I've seen in 2023 with regard to social listening. Well, we're social listening to you right now because we got another question from social media. Lauren P. asks, for those of us that wish to learn more and want to attend Dinfos courses but can't support being away for an extended period of time, what would you recommend for learning tools that we could use on our own?
Oh, wow. So Dinfos has a great site, the Pavilion site. I'm sure we'll throw the link up later. But we've got a lot of things in there about that in regards to not only social media, but just communication strategy as a whole. So learn to take better photos, learn to take better videos. All of that is available on the pavilion.dinfos.edu site. We have an awesome mobile training team within the organization itself. So you can always reach out to Mel Weatherspoon. I'm sure we'll throw her email up or contact information up.
They'd be happy to develop a curriculum for our viewers who want to learn more about any particular concept,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. So not just social, but everything communication based. So we understand that sometimes it's difficult, especially social media, right? A lot of times we get to a unit or organization and it's like, hey, you've got the most experience with it. Well, I've only seen social for 2 months. Great. It's 2 months longer than everybody else. So you're not a social media person, right? But you have no understanding of or grasp of where to even begin. Pavilion's a great start. Calling the schoolhouse is a great start. And we've got tools and we can make that training available to you. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's also tools outside of the DoD that people should definitely look into. I think YouTube has hosts of videos all up to date on the latest trends and how to leverage those for any particular platform. So check those out as well. But I think there's one important learning tool that we're failing to mention, which you should, because you're the host of it, the social media forum. Please tell our audience about this great learning experience.
So we actually have the social media forum 2023 is coming up August 23rd, 24th. That'll be in Annapolis, Maryland. Registration is still open, although it's pretty slim. I'll probably make this announcement and probably fill up right after that. But you can come to Annapolis, join us in Annapolis. We've got some dynamic speakers that are coming out. Mr. Mark Schaefer, who's a famous marketer and author, is going to come out and speak to us about audiences. We're going to have people from West Virginia, people from National Defense University, people from Syracuse and whatever. They're all coming together. Some people within the DoD itself coming together and just kind of giving you some valuable insights into how to create better content, how to look at and analyze the data, how to change direction, how influence operations are working in this digital environment. I mean, just a great 2-day event. I'm really excited about it. This is the first year that we're actually in person. This is year 5 now, I think. So the first year we were kind of sideswiped by year 4, sideswiped by COVID. We did 2 years virtual. We did another year that was kind of semi-virtual, and so it's going to be a nice event. You can tune in. We'll live stream it to the Dinfos website as well, and you can also tune into the Dinfos YouTube channel. But August 23rd, 24th, mark your calendars. It'll run from about 9 o'clock to about 4:30, something like that. So.
Absolutely. We'll make sure to put the links in the show notes for that event, so don't miss it. And actually, you mentioned Syracuse, and I can't fail to mention if we don't mention the fact that you're going to be leaving the schoolhouse. You're going to be taking a job with Syracuse University soon, but it'll be sad to see you go, but we wish you the very best in that future endeavor. Yeah. And before we say goodbye to you as a Dinfos instructor, Dinfos faculty member, and also a guest on this program, do you have any final comments about or words of wisdom about social media our audience should take with them?
Oh, wow. First, thanks for that. Yeah, I will be leaving in August. So kind of sad to go, but also exciting for the next chapter. Be at Newhouse, teaching in PR. So that'll be great. And obviously, I love the DoD, so I'll still be, maintain contact here. But just social, it's going to continue to evolve, but don't forget your audiences. I think the audience is always going to be the driving factor. The audience is always going to be the future that dictates and determine what direction we go, what success, what failure looks like. Tune into the audience. Understand that social is not about what you want to say, but what your audience wants to hear from you. So those will be my parting words. Just keep grinding at it, man. It's going to be trial and error. You're going to make mistakes, and it's okay to make a mistake. Just learn from it and move forward. Absolutely. And again, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention just what a tremendous impact you've had on the schoolhouse and our curriculum and social media training in general. I think we'll be definitely sad to lose you, but again, wish for you all the best in all your future endeavors. Appreciate it. Well, that concludes our show for this month. I want to thank Mr. Hall for taking time out to be here, and I want to thank you all for tuning in. Look for any of the links we discussed in our show notes from today's episode. And remember, if you prefer to listen to our show rather than watch it, just download it as a podcast by searching for Dinfos Live on your podcatcher of choice. Join us next month on July 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern, where we'll be talking about motion graphics. All right, see you later, everybody. Have a great one.